I sent my son a message on my 63rd birthday because nobody remembered. Not even a text. Just silence, thick and cold like the space between stars. I wrote something simple, something that shouldn't have required a PhD to understand. Hey, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while. Derek's response came 3 hours later. 3 hours. I watched those typing dots appear and disappear for what felt like an eternity, wondering what profound wisdom my only child was crafting. We need some distance. Stop contacting us. Before we continue, we ask you to subscribe and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. 7 words. That's what 3 hours of contemplation produced. 7 words that felt like a knife sliding between my ribs, cold and surgical. But here's the part that really got me, the detail that made me laugh until I couldn't breathe. Kayla, his wife, liked the message. Actually hit the little thumbs up emoji like he'd just posted a funny meme or a picture of their overpriced brunch. At least someone finally liked something I wrote, I told Evelyn that night, staring at my phone screen until the words blurred. My wife didn't laugh. She never does when things get dark. Instead, she set down her book and looked at me with those calculating eyes that first made me fall in love with her 40 years ago. Silence hurts louder than screaming, she said. What's that supposed to mean? It means you don't respond. Not yet. Let them think they won. I looked at her, this woman who'd stood beside me through engineering school, through 3 job layoffs, through the loss of our daughter Emma when she was only 6 months old. Evelyn never broke, never bent. She just recalculated. I'm tired of letting people think they've won, I said. Then don't let them think it. Make them know they've lost. The next morning I drove to First National Bank. The air smelled of new carpet and broken dreams, the kind that stick to your clothes long after you leave. Everything inside gleamed with the hollow polish of corporate optimism, glass walls that reflected no one honestly, chrome fixtures that could blind you if you stared too long, and fake plants that stood as proof that even imitation life could thrive better than some families. I'd been coming here for 37 years. The same building where I'd opened Derek's first savings account when he was 10, his face pressed to the counter, impatient to hold the glossy blue booklet that made him feel like an adult. The same place where I'd co-signed his student loans, believing, foolishly, that education was still a form of investment and not a slow-bleeding debt sentence. The same bank where I'd built the trust fund meant to give him and Kayla a chance, a safety net woven from decades of my work, my sweat, my restraint. I need to make some changes to account 773, I told Patricia, the account manager who always wore too much perfume, a floral fog that tried to disguise nerves or boredom, I could never tell which. Of course, Mr. Kellogg, she said, the smile rehearsed, her fingers already poised above the keyboard. What kind of changes? Close it. She blinked. Her smile twitched, but didn't fall. I'm sorry. Close the account. Transfer everything to my primary checking. Remove all secondary authorization. Patricia's fingers hovered midair like small, nervous birds unsure where to land. But that's your son's access account, the one linked to the family trust. I'm aware. Her voice softened, pity wrapped in professionalism. Mr. Kellogg, are you sure? There's over $40,000 in transfers scheduled for next month alone. Cancel them. But, Patricia, I've been banking here since before you were born, I said, sharper than I meant to. Close the goddamn account. She did. By the end of that afternoon, I'd closed 4 more accounts, investment portfolios, joint cards, the emergency fund I'd established after Derek lost his job 3 years back. Every thread that connected my name to his financial web, I cut with surgical precision. Clean lines. No hesitation. Evelyn was right. Silence did hurt louder than screaming. By 7 p.m., the first call came. By 8, There were 23 missed. By midnight, 109. I didn't answer a single one. I sat in my office, door locked, the room faintly smelling of old coffee and dust, listening to the voicemails pile up, a chorus of unraveling. Derek's voice moved through every human register, confusion, anger, pleading, disbelief. It was like watching someone drown, not in water but in entitlement, thrashing for control he no longer had. Dad, what the hell? Call me back. This is ridiculous. You can't just... Kayla's crying. You've ruined everything. You're being manipulative and petty. Fine. Fine. If this is how you want to play it, we're done. Completely done. The last message arrived at 2 a.m, ragged and exhausted. His voice had collapsed into something small, almost childlike. They're going to repossess the Tesla tomorrow. Please, I'll come over. We'll talk. Just, please. I deleted it. The next 3 days passed like a fever dream, unreal but sticky, like time itself had turned viscous. My phone was a weapon I refused to touch. The texts multiplied, unread, 1,000 small demands pretending to be communication. Kayla took her campaign public. Vague posts about toxic family members and protecting your peace, perfectly crafted for an audience hungry for villains. Her friends circled her like loyal drones, showering every vague accusation with heart emojis and digital sympathy. Your generation really loves performing your emotions in public, I said to Evelyn, scrolling through the comments. Don't read it, she said. You're feeding the obsession. I'm not obsessed, I lied. I'm angry. Anger and obsession are cousins, she said. Sometimes they're twins. On the 4th day, Derek came to the house. Through the upstairs window, I watched him hammer on the front door, his face red, his body trembling with frustration. Kayla sat in the car, arms crossed, the judgment radiating off her even from 50 feet away. She was always good at silent condemnation. Dad, I know you're in there. This is insane. I didn't move, didn't even breathe, just watched. Evelyn's hand rested gently on my shoulder. You know what happens next, don't you? Tell me. They'll paint you as the villain, she said quietly. Senile, unstable, dangerous. They'll turn your friends against you. They'll make you small. Let them try. She was right, of course. She's always right. By the end of the week, the isolation began to crystallize. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. Bill from the golf club stopped returning calls. Margaret, Evelyn's best friend of 2 decades, suddenly found herself too busy for dinner. Even my brother Tom, who I'd bailed out of debt twice, texted, "Maybe you should apologize to Derek." Family is family. It didn't just feel like distance, it felt like erasure. The whispers followed me to the grocery store. People I'd known for half my life suddenly found new fascination with the produce section when I passed. At the hardware store, where I'd bought tools and paint every Saturday for 30 years, the clerk asked if I was doing okay, his tone heavy with rumors. I started keeping track, not obsessively, not yet, but carefully. Who looked away, who crossed the street, who unfriended me. Derek and Kayla were building a narrative, and the world was buying it wholesale. Because no one wants to believe the young can be cruel. No one wants to think the abuse might flow upward. On the 8th day, the letter came. Heavy envelope, expensive paper, embossed with Clement Stern, attorney at law. The kind of stationery that believed in its own authority. Dear Mr. Kellogg, it has come to our attention that you have engaged in financial manipulation and emotional abuse toward your son, Derek Kellogg, and his wife, Kayla Kellogg. The rest blurred together in a storm of legal jargon. Elder abuse in reverse, competency hearings, court-appointed guardian. I read it 3 times, each repetition more surreal than the last. Somehow, taking my own money back had become an act of cruelty. They're actually doing this, I said. Evelyn didn't even look surprised. What did you expect? You declared war. Wars have casualties. I didn't declare anything, I said. I just stopped funding their lifestyle. In their world, that's the same thing. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The silence of the house pressed down like weight. I found myself thinking of Emma, our daughter who never grew old enough to fight with us, never got to disappoint or betray. 6 months old, frozen forever in that impossible perfection. Sudden infant loss syndrome. 3 words that mean everything and nothing. Derek used to cry at her grave, the kind of crying that racked his small body. He'd been 8, old enough to know she was gone, too young to understand why. I'd held him close, whispering that it wasn't his fault, that sometimes the world just breaks things for no reason. I hadn't realized then that I was telling the truth about all of us. Now I wondered if I'd been wrong. Maybe the world didn't break people. Maybe people just revealed who they'd always been once you stopped giving them reasons to pretend. That thought sat in my chest like a stone, cold and rolling. I made tea I didn't drink and wandered into the dim living room, drawn to the box of photo albums on the lowest shelf, the ones we'd kept under the spare sofa cushion because they were too precious to toss and too painful to bury. I pulled one out and opened it like a small ritual, the pages crackling with memory and the faint, stale perfume of old paper. Pictures of Derek as a baby stared back at me, pudgy cheeks, a tuft of hair that refused to lie flat, a blanket wrapped around him like a promise. There he was as a toddler, knees mud-stained, grin missing a tooth, mischief in his eyes. Teenaged Derek at Christmas with a ridiculous sweater, blowing out candles at a birthday party with friends crowded close. Graduation photos, tassel swung, hand outstretched, the future folded into a glossy print. In every single photograph, he looked safe, loved, secure. The images were proof, or so I'd told myself for years, that we had done something right. Where had that boy gone? I traced the outline of his small hand, frozen in one picture, and felt the answer slide away like water between fingers. Or had he ever really existed in the way I wanted him to? Maybe I'd been looking at those photos through the lens of parental delusion, seeing the shape of devotion where there had only been obligation, mistaking complacency for contentment. Maybe love, preened and posed for the camera, had been a performance as much as anything. One photograph pulled me back every time. Derek at 16, standing beside the used Honda I'd bought him. The car was practical, beige, a little scuffed where a shopping cart had met its bumper. It was the kind of vehicle that got you from A to B without making promises. He'd complained it wasn't new. He'd complained it wasn't the BMW his friend had gotten. I remembered thinking then, and saying plainly, that he needed to learn the value of things before he could appreciate them. He'd just rolled his eyes. "Whatever, Dad," he'd said, dismissive and sharp in a way I thought was funny at the time. I should have paid more attention to that eye roll. I should have cataloged it then. A small fissure that, given time and weather, would widen. Instead, I chalked it up to adolescence, to ego, to the inevitable distance between parent and child. I told myself we'd course correct. We didn't. On day 10, I found my car parked across the street from Derek's office without meaning to. I told myself I was on a coffee run or looking for a place to return a book, little lies that sounded better than the truth. I wanted to see him moving through the life I'd helped stitch for him, to measure his success against my own ledger of sacrifices. I sat there and watched. People flowed in and out of the building like a tide. Young professionals in suits tailored to leave no seam untucked, their shoes expensive and their conversations lubricated by dry cleaning and networking apps. They carried coffee cups that cost more than a decent lunch and wore faces practiced for meetings. I watched Derek leave for lunch with colleagues, laughing a practiced laugh, then watched him come back, shoulders tensing as he stepped through the revolving door. The office lights burned late into the evening, silhouettes at desks, a glow that meant business and bills, and the relentless maintenance of an image. He was working hard, I told myself, because I needed to believe at least that much. Working hard to keep a facade of success in the same way someone keeps the outer walls of a house painted while the foundation rots. Time stretched thin and then snapped, hours folding over themselves. Around 9, a security guard knocked on my window, his face impassive, the uniform a neutral gray. "You've been here a while, sir. Everything okay?" "Just thinking," I lied, and the words felt small and useless. "This isn't a parking lot. You need to move along." "I know. I'm going." I didn't go home. I drove to a Walmart parking lot and parked under a sodium streetlight, the car an island of reflected plastic. Dawn came in slow, pale bands through the windshield. The cold crawled into my bones. My joints complained with the kind of honesty the rest of me had stopped practicing. The gas station coffee went from warm to tepid, to a memory of sweetness and regret. I tried to sleep with my hands on the wheel and woke with my neck cramping like a punishment. At 3 in the morning, unexpected laughter came bubbling up, thin and brittle. Not the bright laughter of relief, but the kind that happens when you realize how absurd you've become. An old man in a cheap sedan, haunting his child's workplace like a character from a bad novel. I could see the outlines of a joke, me, the protagonist of my own misread life, chasing ghosts because I couldn't let go of the comforts I'd financed and the expectations they'd grown into. A different security guard rapped on my window around 6, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "You okay, buddy?" "Just thinking," I said again, and this time the guard's expression had softened into something like concern, the neighborly worry people reserve for those they think are close to losing their way. "You said that last time. You need me to call someone?" "No." He looked at me then, with a mixture of pity and suspicion that used to be reserved for characters on crime dramas. For a moment, I imagined him dialing, my face the subject of a report to be filed and forgotten. That's what I'd become, it seemed. Someone whose presence warranted a notation in someone else's day. Suspicious. I drove home with the sun rising behind me, the sky the pale color of hospital sheets. My body felt foreign, as if I'd borrowed it for the night and returned it with new fault lines. Every joint ached. My hands trembled the way they do when you hold a cup too tightly. Evelyn was in the kitchen, the tiles cool under her slippers. She was reading the news on her tablet, thumb moving over the screen with practiced disinterest. She didn't look up when I came in. She never looked up anymore at the precise moment I walked through the door. Her absence of notice had become a new kind of presence. "You smell like a parking lot," she said finally, not bothering with levity. Observant as always. She finished a sip of coffee and set the tablet down. "Derek's lawyer filed the competency petition. Hearing is in 3 weeks." The words landed with the dull, reverberating thud of a gavel. I sat down hard in the kitchen chair, feeling all 63 years compress into a single, too heavy moment. They're really going to do this? "Of course they are," she said. She sounded almost delighted by the inevitability, as if the world had finally given her proof it could be counted on to behave predictably. "You took away their money. Money makes people creative with their morality." I asked the question that had been forming like an ache. "What do I do?" Her face changed then. The softness that had kept me company for decades thinned to a line. That look, cold, sharp, purposeful, was not new, but it surprised me all the same. I had seen it before, when she balanced household accounts, when she read contracts, when she decided which medical appointment we could afford. It was the face of someone who had learned to bend life into a plan and had long ago stopped expecting gratitude. "You fight back," she said, "but smart, not loud. I don't know how to do that." She said something I never thought she'd say to me, the engineer who had spent a life calculating tolerances and testing materials. "Yes, you do. You're an engineer. You built bridges that held thousands of tons. You calculated stress points and load distributions. This is the same thing, just with different materials. She leaned forward, palms flat on the table, the geometry of her body squared like a blueprint. Don't be dramatic. Don't be petty. Use facts, documents, witnesses. Make it impossible for them to tell a story that doesn't look malicious. You find the weak points, the strain points, and you apply force where it matters. You don't blow things up. You reroute the load. I stared at her. Her words felt like a schematic drawn for war. You want me to engineer his destruction? I said, the accusation more a question than a judgment. She didn't flinch. I want you to stop being a victim. There's a difference. Her hands were steady on the table. In the silence that followed, I could hear the distant hum of the neighborhood waking up, sprinklers clicking, a dog barking, the world pretending nothing had shifted. I thought of the trust I'd set up, the accounts I'd severed, the photo of a boy rolling his eyes. I thought of how mistakes calcify into reputation. I thought of how a life built carefully, with rivets of small kindness, could be dismissed in an afternoon by a single, well-crafted narrative. There was a part of me that recoiled at the coldness of what she proposed. Another part, quieter, older, the part that had learned to read blueprints and predict failure, recognized the logic. If I wanted to keep anything of my dignity, anything of the life I'd paid for, I would not do it by yelling in the street. I would do it the way bridges endure, by redistributing weight, reinforcing what was sound, exposing the rot where it existed. So I nodded, which felt like the first honest thing I'd done in days. That afternoon, I started digging. Not physically, digitally. Derek had always been careless with passwords, one of those people who used the same combination for everything because convenience mattered more than security. His email password was Kayla 2019, the year they got married. Romantic and stupid in equal measure. I spent 6 hours reading through his correspondence. Business deals that smelled wrong, invoices for services never rendered, communications with people who had titles but no clear functions. And then I found it, buried in a folder marked Quarterly Reports. Evidence that Derek had used my digital signature, the one I'd given him for emergency access to my investment accounts, to move $70,000 into a shell company called Pinnacle Consulting Group. My hands shook as I read the transfer details. $70,000. Money I'd earned through decades of 60-hour work weeks and calculated risks. Money that was supposed to fund my retirement, my security, my final years of not having to worry about whether I could afford my medications or my mortgage. He'd stolen it. Not borrowed. Stolen. There was no other word for it. I called Evelyn into my office. She read the screen in silence, her face unreadable. "When?" she asked. 4 months ago. Before or after Emma's birthday? Emma's birthday, March 15th. The day we always visited her grave, just the two of us, leaving flowers and sitting in silence, because what else can you do with grief that never ages? After, I said quietly. 2 days after. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then he knew what he was doing. He knew you'd be distracted, emotionally vulnerable. He waited for the perfect moment. The rage that hit me was physical, not hot, not explosive, cold, calculated. The kind of anger that doesn't make you stupid, it makes you precise, it makes you dangerous. "I'm going to destroy him," I said. "Good," Evelyn said. "But not yet. Fear grows in silence. Let him think he got away with it. Let him get comfortable." "How long?" "A week, maybe 2. Long enough that when you strike, he won't see it coming." Over the next week, I became a different person, not worse. Different. I started documenting everything, every email, every transaction, every piece of evidence that Derek had built his life on my foundation and then tried to burn the house down. Evelyn helped. She'd always been smarter than me, better with details, capable of seeing patterns I missed. Together, we built a case, not for court necessarily, for something else, something more permanent. We discovered that Pinnacle Consulting Group didn't actually exist. The business registration was fake. The address was a mailbox store in a strip mall. The phone number went to a voicemail that never got checked. Derek had created an entire fictional company just to launder my money. "This is federal fraud," Evelyn said, scrolling through the documents. "Wire fraud, identity theft, probably RICO if they wanted to stretch it." "What's RICO?" "Organized crime statutes, the kind of thing that puts people in federal prison for decades." I stared at the screen. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd stayed up with after Emma died. He was facing federal prison, and part of me felt nothing but satisfaction. That's when I knew I'd changed. That's when I knew there was no going back. "He's having a gala," Evelyn said one morning, showing me her phone. "Corporate fundraiser for some charity, $500 a plate. All his business partners will be there. Everyone who matters in his professional world." I looked at the invitation. Glossy, expensive, the kind of thing that screamed, "I've made it," while whispering, "I'm insecure about whether anyone notices." "When?" I asked. 2 weeks. The Riverside Convention Center." I smiled, actually smiled. A perfect night for family bonding. I spent those 2 weeks planning, not out of impulse, not out of rage, but with the calm focus of a man reacquainting himself with precision. I mapped, calculated, revised, not recklessly, methodically. The convention center's blueprints became my bedtime reading. I learned the security rotations, memorized where the cameras overlapped, and where their blind spots breathed. I watched online videos of past galas to study the pacing of the evening, the way the guests arrived in waves, their laughter swelling and fading like tides. I ordered a maintenance uniform online for $30, stitched the logo on myself. I practiced walking the way service workers do, efficient, unnoticed, invisible. People don't look at the help, they look through them. That invisibility would be my armor. The night of the gala, the city glowed like a wound beneath the rain. I arrived an hour early through the service entrance, toolbox in hand, heart steady. The guard at the door didn't even blink. "Here for the AV setup?" he asked, voice tired from routine. "Sound check," I said. "Boss wants everything perfect." He chuckled. "Tell me about it. These rich folks lose their minds if the mic pops." I gave him a polite smile. He waved me through. Inside, I moved with purpose. Every hallway, every exit, every junction was a memory waiting to be made. I traced the electrical lines, found the audio-visual hub, the control room, the security office with the flickering monitor that no one was watching closely enough. The ballroom was an engineered fantasy, crystal chandeliers, gold-draped tables, floral arrangements that smelled of money and disinterest. I could almost hear Derek's voice in the details, his obsession with appearance, his need to impress people he didn't even respect. He'd spared no expense. Of course he hadn't. It wasn't his expense to spare. I found the AV booth manned by a technician who looked barely out of college, all headphones and caffeine jitters. "Last-minute sound check," I said. "Boss is paranoid about acoustics." "Go for it," he said, already halfway to the door. "I need a smoke." Perfect. I plugged my laptop into the main feed, hands steady. The projector accepted the input without complaint. My file uploaded smoothly, like it was meant to be there. The presentation I'd built over 2 sleepless weeks, clean slides, crisp evidence, an engineer's dream of order, no theatrics, just facts, timelines, numbers, proof. 15 minutes later, I had the system set to override at exactly 8:55 p.m. I checked it twice, then again. Old habits die hard. Then I waited. From behind the curtain, I watched Derek play host. He was radiant in his own artificial light, shaking hands, telling jokes, kissing the air beside people's cheeks. He was good at this, always had been. He'd learned early that charm could disguise rot if you smiled long enough. Kayla was beside him, shimmering in a dress that looked carved out of starlight, her smile painted on with precision. Together, they looked like a catalog advertisement for success, glossy, curated, and utterly hollow. At 8:55, I pulled the breaker. The darkness came down like judgment. Gasps, nervous laughter, the flutter of confusion. People always panic in the dark, not because they fear the dark itself, but because it exposes what's real. The backup generator hummed to life, and my projector flickered on. Not theirs, mine. Slide after slide, the truth unfolded. Bank transfers signed with my name, emails outlining temporary reallocations. The shell company registered to a P.O. box in Nevada, text messages about managing the old man's finances. Every transaction annotated, every deceit time-stamped. The room went still, the kind of silence that holds its breath. I stepped into the light. My coveralls caught the glow. My voice was steady. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," I said. "I'm Norman Kellogg, Derek's father, the man he stole $70,000 from, the man he tried to have, declared incompetent." I looked directly at him, standing frozen among the guests, mouth open but voiceless. The man he told to stay distant. A pause. Just long enough for shame to find him. "Just wanted to be included, son," I said. "Guess I made the guest list after all." Then I walked out. No one stopped me. No one dared. Behind me, I heard the beginnings of chaos. Derek's voice cracking, Kayla hissing something sharp, the crowd murmuring as the lights came back on. But some things can't be undone. Once truth burns bright, shadows have nowhere left to hide. By morning, the story had legs. Local business blogs first, then the tabloids. Kellogg dynasty in turmoil. Son accused of elder financial abuse. The irony was almost poetic. He'd called me abusive, manipulative. Now the world called him the same. My phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters, old acquaintances, fair-weather friends. I didn't answer. I just sat in the living room, coffee in hand, watching headlines multiply like bacteria. 3 days later, Derek struck back. Lawsuits, plural. Defamation, harassment, emotional distress, the kind of claims that sound convincing when filed by someone with better lawyers. My pension froze overnight. The court cited asset preservation. 17,000 became 1,700. Bills waited. The house felt colder. "They're trying to starve you out," Evelyn said, flipping through the papers. "They're succeeding." "No," she said, eyes glinting with that same controlled fury I'd seen before. "They're getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." She was right. The cracks began to show. Kayla took to the internet again, weeping, confessing, performing. She painted me as the monster under their marital bed, Derek as the wounded hero. Half the viewers worshipped her, half wanted her head. That's the beauty of modern outrage. It never cares about truth, only spectacle. But Evelyn, she was a different kind of strategist. She moved quietly, with intent. Phone calls, emails, favors owed and collected. She met with Clement Stern, Derek's lawyer, over lunch at a restaurant where deals were made behind candles and wine. I never asked what she said. I didn't have to. A week later, Derek signed a consulting contract with Meridian Strategic Solutions, a firm that existed only on paper with a Delaware address and a professional-looking website that Evelyn had built from a template. 20,000 up front, 30,000 due on deliverables. He paid. He had to. By the time he realized the firm was smoke and mirrors, the money was gone, split, laundered, dissolved into nothing, then quietly reappearing in places it belonged all along. Evelyn smiled that night, the kind of smile that meant something irreversible had been set in motion. "See?" she said, pouring us each a drink. "Engineers aren't the only ones who understand structure." And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not victory, but balance. "That's illegal," I said, when Evelyn explained it. No, she said calmly. It's restitution, and it's only illegal if someone can prove it. They'll figure it out. Will they? Derek just admitted to paying a fake company for fake services. If he reports it, he's admitting to more fraud. He's trapped. I stared at her. How long have you been planning this? Since the day he sent you that message. I knew he'd escalate. I knew he'd get desperate. I've been 3 steps ahead the entire time. I started to enjoy this, the game of it, the precision, watching Derek scramble and panic while I stayed 3 moves ahead. It became addictive. Every morning, I'd wake up wondering what new mistake he'd make, what new opportunity would present itself. I hacked their smart home system. Not difficult. The default password was still admin, and they'd never bothered to change it. I spent an evening listening to them argue through their kitchen speaker, their voices tinny and desperate. This is your fault, Kayla screamed. Your father is insane and you knew it. He's not insane. He's angry. There's a difference. Then fix it. Make him stop. I don't know how. Every time I try something, it backfires. Every time I think I'm ahead, he's already 10 steps past me. He's 63 years old. He should be losing his mind, not outsmarting you. That stung Derek. I could hear it in the silence that followed. I recorded everything. Not for legal purposes, for leverage, for the moment when I'd need them to understand that every action has a consequence. Every cruelty leaves a scar that remembers. You're not fixing anything, Evelyn said one night, watching me scroll through the recordings. I'm calibrating karma, I said. Karma doesn't need calibration. It needs patience. I'm out of patience. She looked at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. You're becoming what you hate. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just becoming what's necessary. There's no difference. That's the problem. The police arrived on a Tuesday morning. Not for me, for Derek. Apparently, someone had filed a formal complaint about financial fraud, complete with documentation and evidence and a very detailed timeline of illegal activities. The complaint was anonymous, but thorough. Professional. The kind of thing that comes from someone who understands both the law and how to weaponize it. I watched from my car, parked down the street, as they led him out of his office in handcuffs. He wasn't crying. Just stunned, like he couldn't understand how the world had stopped obeying his expectations. His colleagues watched from the windows. Some looked shocked. Others looked like they'd been expecting this. Kayla posted about it within the hour. Wrongful arrest. Corrupt system targeting successful young entrepreneurs. Standing by my husband through this injustice. The comments section was less sympathetic this time. People were starting to notice patterns, starting to ask questions. My phone rang that night, a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. Hello? Dad. Derek's voice, small, broken, the voice of a child who'd scraped his knee and needed his father to make it better. You wanted distance, I said. How's that working out? Please. They're going to charge me with wire fraud. Federal charges. I could go to prison for 20 years. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. I didn't steal. I borrowed. I was going to pay it back. With money you don't have, from a business that doesn't exist, using fraud that I documented. Silence. Then, quietly, what do you want? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? Revenge? Justice? An apology that would never feel sincere because it would always be coerced? I want you to understand what you took from me, I said. Not just money, trust, family, the belief that I raised someone who wouldn't betray me for a car payment and a big house. I'm sorry. No, you're scared. There's a difference. You're only sorry because you got caught. You're only sorry because the consequences finally caught up to you. If I'd never found out, you'd still be stealing. That's not true. Isn't it? More silence. In the background, I could hear Kayla's voice, sharp and insistent. Tell him we'll go public. Tell him we'll destroy his reputation. Derek covered the phone, but I heard him anyway. We already tried that. I hung up. Derek called again 3 days later. Different tone. Not begging, bargaining. Meet me at the lake house, he said. Just us. No lawyers, no phones. We'll talk. Really talk. Father to son. Why would I do that? Because you want answers. Because despite everything, despite all this hatred, I'm still your son, and you're still my father. Somewhere under all this damage, that has to mean something. The lake house. The place we used to go every summer when Derek was young, back when family vacations meant something other than coordinated social media posts and performance art. Evelyn and I had bought it 30 years ago, a small cabin on 2 acres of pine trees and bad cell reception. We'd gone there to escape. Now it felt like the only place left where escape was possible. Don't go, Evelyn said when I told her. It's a trap. Maybe, but I'm tired of fighting through screens and lawyers. You're being stupid. Probably, but I need to see him face to face. I need to know if there's anything left of the boy I raised, or if that person is completely gone. What if he's gone? Then at least I'll know. At least I'll have certainty instead of this constant wondering. She studied me for a long moment. If you go, take something to protect yourself. A weapon. I'm not going to hurt my son. I'm not worried about you hurting him. I'm worried about what he might do if he's desperate enough. The house loomed in front of me like a relic from a forgotten time. I hadn't seen it in years, but it had aged 20 in the span of 5. The paint was peeling in wide, flaking sheets, and the dock was barely standing. Its boards were warped and missing, gaps like teeth in a mouth long since forgotten. No one had come here for at least 2 seasons, maybe longer. The place, once the embodiment of home and comfort, now felt like a monument to neglect. Derek's car was already parked out front, a rental. I could guess what had happened to the Tesla. They must have taken it back by now. I parked beside the unfamiliar vehicle, the weight of Evelyn's warning still heavy in my mind. I grabbed the tire iron from my trunk, the cold steel feeling almost reassuring in my hand, and walked up to the front door. Before I could knock, Derek opened the door. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks, maybe months. His hair was unkempt, sticking up in every direction, and his eyes were hollow, as though he'd been carrying a burden too heavy to bear. He'd lost a lot of weight, the kind that doesn't come from exercise or diet, but from stress, from living with something too painful to face. Thanks for coming, he said, his voice raspy, as if it took all his energy to speak. I'm not here to forgive you, I replied flatly. He didn't flinch, but the air between us thickened. We didn't need to say anything more. I followed him into the living room. The silence was suffocating, oppressive. Outside, the rain started to tap against the windows, the sound sharp and insistent, like the storm knew there were things here that needed to be washed away. Why did you do it? I asked, finally breaking the stillness. He looked away, staring at the worn carpet like it held all the answers. The money? No, all of it, I said. The message, the distance, the theft, the lawsuits. Take your pick. He glanced at his hands, as if they belonged to someone else. I don't know, I guess. I got tired of feeling like I owed you everything. You did owe me everything. I gave you everything. That's the problem, Dad, Derek said, finally lifting his eyes to meet mine. That's exactly the problem. You gave so much that I never learned how to earn anything. Do you know what that's like? Being 35 years old and still feeling like a child, waiting for his father's approval? Still measuring every success by whether you'd be proud? So you stole from me. I made a bad investment. The shell company was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to flip properties, make a quick profit, and I'd pay you back 3 times what I took. I was trying to be successful without your help. With my money. With our money, he corrected, his voice growing stronger. The trust was supposed to be family money. You said that when you set it up, for the family. The trust was mine until I died, I said, the words cold and final. That was the agreement. That was always the agreement. Agreements change, people change, circumstances change. Apparently. The conversation spiraled from there, the accusations and justifications building on each other like a house of cards. I blamed him for his entitlement, for taking everything and appreciating nothing. He blamed me for being too controlling, for making every gift feel like a loan. Round and round we went, two men who used to love each other now circling, both of us waiting for the other to yield. You were never satisfied, Derek said suddenly, his voice rough with frustration. Nothing I did was ever good enough. When I made the dean's list, you asked why it wasn't highest honors. When I got my first job, you asked why the salary wasn't higher. When I married Kayla, you made that face. What face? The face that said I was settling. The face that said she wasn't good enough for your son. She wasn't good enough. She's shallow and materialistic. And she liked the message that broke us. That tells me everything I need to know about her character. She didn't mean anything by it. That's not true. She knew exactly what she was doing. She's cruel, Derek. Not overtly cruel, not in ways that leave marks, but cruel in the small ways, the passive-aggressive ways, the ways that make you question your own perception. Don't talk about my wife. Why not? She talks about me, posts about me. Performs her victimhood for strangers who don't care about anything except the entertainment value of watching a family destroy itself. Derek stood up suddenly, his hands clenched into fists. You humiliated us at that gala. You destroyed my reputation in front of everyone who matters. You destroyed your reputation, I said, my voice steady. I just provided the evidence. I'm your son. Then act like it, I shouted, standing up, anger rising like bile in my throat. Act like someone I raised to have integrity instead of someone who steals from his own father. The words hung in the air between us, sharp, final. Derek's face cycled through anger, shame, and something that might have been grief, each expression flashing across his face too quickly for me to catch. I invited you here to make peace, Derek said quietly, his voice barely audible. I invited you here because, despite everything, I still love you, and I thought maybe somehow you still loved me. I do love you, I said, my voice softer now, the anger draining out of me, replaced by something heavier, something I wasn't ready to face. That's why this hurts so much. That's why I can't just let it go. If I didn't love you, none of this would matter. Then why can't we fix this? Because you don't want to fix it, I said, my words bitter, full of a truth I didn't want to admit. You want me to pretend it never happened. You want me to restore your access to the money and go back to being the convenient father who pays for things and doesn't ask questions. That's not true. Isn't it? I asked, staring at him, eyes unblinking. If I gave you back everything right now, if I dropped all the complaints and restored your accounts, would anything actually change? Would you suddenly become a different person? Or would you just be more careful about getting caught next time? Derek's face hardened at the question, his jaw clenched tight. You'll never forgive me. That's what this is really about. You'll never let me make this right because you enjoy this. You enjoy having power over me for once. For once? I've never wanted power over you, I said, my voice shaking now with the weight of everything we'd buried. I wanted a son who didn't measure our relationship in dollar signs. Everything with you comes back to money, Derek said, his voice cold and bitter. Every conversation, every interaction, you act like money doesn't matter, but it's all you ever talk about. Because you made it matter, I said, my frustration building again. You made our entire relationship transactional. You showed up when you needed something and disappeared when you didn't. Do you know how many birthdays you missed? How many holidays you had other plans for? I have a life, Dad. I have a wife. I can't structure everything around your schedule. I'm not asking you to structure everything around mine. I'm asking you to remember I exist when it's not convenient for you. The rain had picked up, hammering against the roof now, the storm overhead roaring in time with the rage in my chest. Lightning lit up the room, casting long shadows across our faces. "You know what I think?" Derek said suddenly, his voice sharp. "I think you're punishing me for not being Emma." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Emma, our perfect sister who never disappointed you because she never had the chance. I've lived my entire life in the shadow of a ghost. Nothing I did could ever measure up because she was frozen in time as this perfect thing that never grew up to be flawed and human. That's not true, isn't it? You visit her grave more than you visit me. You remember her birthday but forget mine. You compare everything I do to what she might have done. Emma would have loved this. Emma would have been proud. Emma would have understood. I never said those things. You didn't have to. I saw it in your face every time you looked at me. Disappointment that I was alive and she wasn't. I stood up, my hands shaking, feeling my breath catch in my throat. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Derek asked, his eyes cold, hard. You want to know why I took the money? Because I wanted to prove I could succeed without you. Because I was tired of being the consolation prize, the kid who survived instead of the one you actually wanted. Emma was 6 months old. She wasn't a person yet. She was a baby who died for no reason. And I was the 8-year-old who had to watch my parents fall apart, who had to be perfect because you were already broken. Do you know what that does to a child? Knowing that your existence isn't enough to make your parents happy? The room spun, my vision blurring for a moment. I grabbed the back of the chair to steady myself. We never made you feel that way. You didn't have to make me feel it. It just was. Every time Mom cried, every time you got that distant look, every time our family went to therapy and the therapist asked how we were coping with the loss. I was right there, alive, trying to be enough. And I never was. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, suffocating. Was he right? Had I spent 30 years mourning a daughter I barely knew while neglecting the son right in front of me? I'm sorry, I said quietly, my voice raw. If that's how you felt, I'm sorry. But it doesn't excuse what you did. It doesn't make the theft okay. I know. But at least now you know why. The anger drained out of us, replaced by something heavier. Grief. The kind of grief that comes from recognizing damage that can never be fully repaired. Derek walked to the window, staring out at the storm. Kayla wants to leave me. Did you know that? She filed preliminary divorce papers yesterday. Her lawyer says I'm a liability. That's the word they used. Liability. I'm sorry. Are you? Isn't this what you wanted? My marriage destroyed, my career ruined, my life in pieces? No. I wanted you to understand consequences. I didn't want to destroy you. Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished anyway. He turned to face me, tears now on his face, real tears. I'm going to prison, Dad. The federal prosecutor offered a plea deal. 7 years. 7 years of my life gone because I tried to prove something to a father who was never going to be impressed anyway. Did you take it? Not yet. I have until Monday to decide. But my lawyer says if I go to trial and lose, I'm looking at 20. So really, there's no choice. 7 years. He'd be 42 when he got out. His life, everything he'd worked for, burned to ash. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt hollow. I'll testify on your behalf, I heard myself say. At sentencing, I'll tell them you were trying to pay me back, that it was a family misunderstanding. Why would you do that? Because you're my son, and because I'm tired of this. They won't care. The evidence is too strong. Maybe, but at least you'll know I tried. Derek laughed bitterly. Too little, too late, Dad. That's been the story of our relationship since Emma died. I pulled out my phone, opened the security app for the lake house, and activated the cameras. Every room, every corner, all streaming live to a private server. Not recording for later. Broadcasting now. What the hell, Dad? You wanted a conversation, I said, voice steady. I'm giving you one. But I want witnesses. I want the world to see what we've become. Witnesses to what? To the truth. To 30 years of dysfunction that started with the loss of a baby and ended with a stolen $70,000. Derek's face went white. Turn it off. No. Turn it off! He lunged for my phone. We both moved faster than I expected, crashing into furniture, knocking over lamps, fighting like two old men who couldn't let go of the years between us. Stop! Derek shouted. Make me! He shoved me hard. I stumbled back, my hip hitting the corner of the table. Pain shot through my side, sharp and electric. I grabbed his arm, twisted, used his momentum against him the way I'd learned in a self-defense class I'd taken 30 years ago and never thought I'd use. We ended up on the floor, both breathing hard, both too stubborn to let go. I hate you, Derek gasped. I know, I said. My phone buzzed against my leg where it had fallen. Once, twice, a dozen times in rapid succession. News alerts, social media notifications. The cameras were working. The stream was live. The world was watching. Derek saw it too. Grabbed his own phone. His face went from white to gray as he scrolled through the notifications, comments, shares, screenshots. Our private war going viral in real time. What did you do? He whispered. I told the truth. Finally. You're insane. No, I'm done pretending family means more than honesty. I stood up slowly, every joint protesting. Derek stayed on the floor, staring at his phone as the notifications multiplied exponentially. Comments from strangers, opinions from people who didn't know us but felt entitled to judge us anyway. The slow-motion train wreck of a family imploding in high definition. One headline caught my eye. Kellogg family scandal goes public. Father and son stream fight live. Another. Elder abuse or justified revenge. Internet divided over viral family confrontation. Derek's business partners were texting him. I could see the messages lighting up his screen. Withdrawal notices. Contract cancellations. The professional equivalent of rats fleeing a sinking ship. I laughed. Actually laughed. Not joy. Something darker. Relief, maybe. The relief that comes from finally hitting bottom, from knowing there's nowhere left to fall. Guess betrayal's hereditary, I said. Derek looked up at me, his eyes empty of everything except despair. You won. Are you happy now? Nobody won. That's not how this works. Then what was the point? The point was making sure you felt what I felt. The point was distance. You wanted it. Now you have it. Miles and miles of it. He stood slowly, his movements mechanical, a puppet with cut strings. I'm leaving. Where will you go? Away from you. Far away. Maybe if I'm lucky, the judge will send me somewhere you can't visit. Derek, just don't. We're done. Completely done. You got your revenge. You destroyed me. Congratulations, Dad. You finally won our competition. He walked to the door, stopped, looked back one last time. Mom would be ashamed of you. Which mom? The one who died? Or the one who helped me plan all this? Derek's face shifted as the words sunk in. His expression shattered, the confusion clearing to reveal something raw and unmistakable. The horror crept up first, followed by betrayal, a deep, gut-wrenching recognition that he hadn't just been fighting me all this time. He'd been fighting us. His entire family had united against him, and the realization hit him like a tidal wave. Evelyn knew? She helped you? His voice was hoarse, trembling with disbelief. I didn't answer him immediately. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed him the texts, the detailed plans, the coordination. Every step we'd taken together, each one laid out like an architectural blueprint. A calculated effort to expose him, but also to unearth the rot that had festered between us for so long. The fake consulting company was her idea, I said, letting the words land heavily. The gala presentation was mine, but the overall strategy, that was us, together. Marriage is partnership, after all. Derek stood motionless, reading, his face cycling through expressions so complex they almost seemed like they didn't belong to him. It wasn't just shock or anger. It was the quiet devastation of realizing he'd been playing a game with no rules, and worse, with no opponents who'd ever been playing by the same game. Then, without warning, he hurled my phone across the room. It hit the wall with a loud crack, then fell to the ground in pieces, the shattered screen reflecting the brokenness in both of us. "You're both monsters," he spat, his voice a mix of fury and helplessness. "Maybe," I said, my own voice low, steady. "Or maybe we're just parents who got tired of being used." He didn't answer. Instead, he walked out, the door slamming behind him with a force that felt like it was shaking the very foundation of the house. I followed him to the door, watched him climb into his car. The engine roared to life, cutting through the noise of the storm. Then, without another word, he was gone. I stood in the doorway, rain pouring in, soaking my clothes, but I didn't move. The storm outside felt like it was mirroring everything inside me. The thunder cracked, loud and violent, lightning flashing across the sky, illuminating the world in stark, blinding white and black. I could feel the weight of everything we'd just said, everything we'd just done, hanging between us like a fog. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't just the storm that felt violent. It was the years that led to this, the slow erosion of a relationship, a family, a trust. My phone, now offline, was just one more casualty of the night. But the cameras, the ones I'd set up weeks ago, were still running, still broadcasting, streaming my destruction, the final act of a play nobody asked for, but everyone was watching. I walked out onto the dock, the creaking of the old wood beneath my feet louder in the quiet of the night. The boards groaned, protesting under my weight, but they held, like everything else had. The rain was relentless now, pouring down in sheets, the lake violent beneath the storm. Waves crashed violently against the pilings, sending sprays of water into the air, a reminder of how much things had changed. This was the place Derek and I used to fish together when he was a child. Early mornings, just the two of us, competing over who could catch the biggest bass. He'd been patient back then, quiet and content to sit in silence, waiting for the fish to bite. When had that changed? When had silence become distance? When had competition morphed into warfare? The storm raged around me, but I couldn't escape the nagging thought that this moment, this wreckage, was just the final, inevitable outcome of everything we had let slip away over the years. Then I heard a car. Not Derek's. The engine was different, and it was too soon for him to turn back. I turned slowly, the wet wind stinging my face, and saw flashing lights, blue and red cutting through the downpour like they were searching for a fire to put out. Police. Multiple cars, pulling up to the driveway, their sirens wailing into the night. The officers emerged cautiously, hands near their weapons but not drawn. They seemed hesitant, unsure of what they were walking into, as though they couldn't quite grasp the enormity of what had happened here. "Mr. Kellogg?" one of them called, his voice cutting through the roar of the storm. "We need you to step away from the edge." "I'm not jumping," I said, the words sharp. "Just thinking." "Sir, we've had reports of a domestic disturbance. We need you to come with us." "Where's my son?" I demanded, a sick feeling growing in the pit of my stomach. "We pulled him over about 2 miles down the road. He's being questioned." Of course he was. Of course, they'd detained both of us, or whatever the legal term was for stopping two men from tearing each other apart. They had no idea what kind of mess they were walking into, no clue about the twisted family dynamic they were now tangled up in. I started walking toward them slowly, my hands visible, trying to stay calm. They were young, these officers, barely out of training, Probably used to drunken brawls or domestic spats. Not the kind of tragedy that had been unfolding for decades. This was something else. Something that didn't fit into their training. Something beyond their experience. And I couldn't help but wonder if this was it. The end of everything. The inevitable consequence of a family falling apart, one broken piece at a time. "Are you hurt, sir?" one asked. "Physically? No? Otherwise?" That's a longer conversation. They put me in the back of a cruiser. Not cuffed, not under arrest, just separated, contained. The vinyl seat was cold and smelled like disinfectant and other people's emergencies. Through the window, I could see Derek in another car. He wasn't looking at me, just staring straight ahead, his face illuminated by his phone screen, still reading the comments, probably, still watching his life disintegrate in real time. One of the officers leaned into my window. "Do you want to press charges?" "For what?" "He assaulted you. We have video evidence from your security system." I laughed. "He didn't assault me. We fought. There's a difference." "Sir, at your age, a physical altercation could be—" "I'm 63, not 90. I'm fine." "What about the theft allegations? The fraud?" "That's federal. Above your pay grade." The officer frowned. "We're trying to help you, Mr. Kellogg." "Then let me go home. We need to make sure you're safe first." "Safe from what? My son? He's the one who should be worried about safety from me." They conferred among themselves. Radios crackled. Eventually, they let me go. No charges filed, no arrests made. Just two men separated and sent home to opposite corners. I drove back to the city in silence, the radio off, the windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm. My phone was destroyed. My family was destroyed. Everything I'd built had been reduced to rubble and streaming video. Evelyn was waiting when I got home. She didn't ask what happened, just looked at me with those calculating eyes and nodded once. "It's done," I said. "Is it?" "He's going to prison. 7 years, probably. His marriage is over. His career is gone. What else is there?" "Consequences," she said. "For both of you." She was right. The federal prosecutor called the next morning. They wanted to interview me. Formally. On the record. About my knowledge of Derek's activities. About my role in exposing them. About whether I'd coordinated with law enforcement. I told them everything. Every detail. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered. Every step of my revenge. The prosecutor listened in silence, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Kellogg, you do realize you've potentially compromised this case?" "How?" "Your methods. The gala presentation, the hacking of his smart home system, the surveillance without consent. Any defense attorney worth their retainer will argue entrapment, privacy violations, illegal search and seizure." "But he still committed the crimes." "Yes, but your actions may make those crimes unprosecutable. You may have destroyed the case while trying to build it." I stared at him. "You're saying he might walk?" "I'm saying it's complicated. We'll proceed, but don't be surprised if this ends differently than you expected." I left the federal building in a daze. Everything I'd done, every calculated move, might have been for nothing. Derek might escape prison because I'd been too thorough, too vindictive, too obsessed with revenge. The irony was almost funny. Almost. Evelyn was less sympathetic when I told her. "I warned you. I told you to be smart, not loud, but you wanted spectacle. You wanted the world to watch. Now you have to live with the consequences." "What consequences? Derek's the one facing charges." "Are you sure about that?" She showed me her laptop, news articles, legal analyses, opinion pieces. Half of them were calling me a hero for exposing financial abuse. The other half were calling me a vigilante who'd violated his son's privacy and due process rights. One article, from a prominent legal scholar, argued I should be investigated for stalking, harassment, and computer crimes. "You're trending," Evelyn said dryly. "Congratulations." This is insane. This is what happens when you make everything public. You don't get to control the narrative anymore. The narrative controls you. She was right. She was always right. The competency hearing that Derek had originally filed was still on the calendar. His lawyer tried to withdraw it, but the court denied the motion. The judge wanted to proceed, wanted to determine whether I was mentally fit to manage my own affairs. The hearing was surreal. Doctors testified about my cognitive function. Psychologists analyzed my behavior patterns. The prosecutor from Derek's case testified about my sophisticated planning abilities. Derek's lawyer argued I was paranoid and vindictive. My lawyer argued I was justifiably angry and highly competent. The judge listened to 6 hours of testimony, then ruled from the bench. Mr. Kellogg, I find that you are mentally competent to manage your financial affairs. However, I am deeply troubled by your actions. While your son's theft was illegal, your response was disproportionate and potentially criminal. I am referring this matter to the district attorney for review of possible charges against you. More consequences. More investigations. The revenge that was supposed to bring justice had brought only chaos. Derek's plea hearing happened 3 weeks later. I attended, sitting in the back row, trying to be invisible. Kayla was there too, on the opposite side of the courtroom, as far from me as physically possible. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my existence. Derek stood before the judge in a cheap suit, his shoulders slumped. His lawyer made a statement about remorse and difficult family circumstances. The prosecutor countered with the severity of the crimes and the need for deterrence. The judge asked Derek if he wanted to say anything. Yes, Your Honor, Derek said quietly. I'd like to apologize to my father. What I did was wrong. I can't justify it or explain it in a way that makes sense. I was angry and entitled, and I thought I deserved what I took. I was wrong. I'm sorry. He turned and looked directly at me. Dad, I'm sorry. For all of it. I wish I could go back and make different choices, but I can't. So all I can do is accept responsibility and hope that someday, maybe, you can forgive me. I wanted to feel something. Satisfaction, vindication, something. Instead, I just felt empty. The judge sentenced him to 5 years. Less than the plea deal because of my testimony on his behalf, more than I'd hoped because of the severity of the evidence. 5 years. Derek would be 40 when he got out. I watched them lead him away in handcuffs. He didn't look back. Kayla left immediately after, her heels clicking on the marble floor. I heard her on her phone in the hallway. It's done. 5 years. No, I'm filing tomorrow. I'm not waiting around for a convicted felon. I sat in the courtroom long after everyone else had left. Just sat there in the silence, thinking about distance. Derek wanted distance. 7 words. We need some distance. Stop contacting us. Now he had it.